All right, welcome back to the show. At this time, we are joined by Don Yates from VandyMania.com as well as 14powers.com. Welcome to the show, Don.
Hey, Peter, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Glad that you're with us, and hopefully, you've been able to stay safe through all this sickness going around.
Oh, yeah, we're pretty much staying hunkered down where we are. We're not leaving the house unless it's absolutely necessary. I'm on the West Coast right now, so on one side of us, I'm in Oregon actually, and one side of us is Washington State, was the worst hit state in the United States for this coronavirus,
Oh,
and
wow.
California is probably the second worst on the other side. So
Wow.
we've
Wow.
had our first death yesterday, I think, from coronavirus in Oregon.
Oh,
So it's
wow.
starting to spread around Oregon.
Well, glad you're staying healthy and using wisdom there. Now, you do cover all 14 teams, but specifically today we want to talk about Vanderbilt and some of the things that fans should be looking for as that they get ready and prepared for next season. Now, the reality is that this team, in my opinion, underachieved last year. I mean, they had a lot of dynamic players coming back on offense and just never did meet the standard that they were supposed to meet. And I thought they were going to win seven, perhaps eight wins with the bowl game win, but obviously underachieved and did not reach that goal. And so there was a lot of shakeup in the coaching staff. And I want to talk specifically about the offensive side of the football. Of course, I think one of the things that I misjudged was the impact it was going to have with Andy Ludwig leaving and what he had started to build there at Vanderbilt and some of the success they had toward the end of the season. So the experience last year did not work. This year they've got Todd Fitch. He's now in charge of this offense, coming from Louisiana Tech. And I just want to start and ask you, what changes do you expect to see from the offensive side of the football with the new offensive coordinator?
I'm thinking they're going to be a little bit more wide open. He had a pretty diverse offense at Louisiana Tech. They did a lot of passing, mostly passing, I think, but some running too. And it's going to be more of a misdirection, um, passing. They were in the top 40 in the nation, and most of the key offensive stats like third down conversion and total yardage and stuff like that. So hopefully they can do better for Vandy because they really made it hard on the defense last year. The offense was so terrible that the defense really stayed on the field way too long, and the defense looked even worse than the offense in the end, basically. But mainly it was because the offense couldn't keep them off the field. I mean, they stayed in the game too long. So, but
Absolutely.
I think it should be a lot better. Vandy fans have been crying for years and complaining for years that Vandy's offense was too vanilla. They hand it off up the middle and get a yard, and they hand it off the middle again and get -1 yard. And then on third down, what are they going to do? Pass. Everybody knows it. So they try to do a little bit of more surprise on throwing first down and stuff like that, but they just didn't have that misdirection stuff like you see in a lot of the SEC, like Auburn,
Right.
the things they do there, you know. But hopefully, I think Vanderbilt will run a little bit more stuff like that, kind of like Auburn does.
Absolutely. I think
But
showing that.
hopefully, they'll be allowed. I'm sorry.
Go
That'd
ahead.
be another thing that's concerning is Andy Ludwig, the guy that was there a couple of years ago. He didn't have a wide open offense at Vanderbilt, but when he was at Utah State on one of them a few years ago, they beat Alabama. He was the offensive coordinator, and they had
Right.
a pretty wide open offense. But he didn't do that at Vanderbilt. And a lot of people said it was because Derek Mason wanted to be like Stanford, and Stanford had a pro style offense, power running game. That might have worked in the Pac-12 with those less strong defense in the SEC. They don't have as good a defensive lineman, I think, in the Pac-12. But I think finally Derek Mason seeing that this type of offense will not work for Vanderbilt. So they got this Todd Fitch guy. Hopefully for
Yeah.
Vandy, they'll be able to get it turned around.
Absolutely. And I think this is something we're seeing across the league with these more defensive minded head coaches is that the game really has changed. I mean, it really has. It used to be that you could go and run the ball 3 times and cloud of dust and occasionally a play action pass here or there and play great defense and special teams and win. But the game's really evolved, really changed the last few years, and we kind of saw this same scenario in Georgia last year. Georgia team loaded with 4 and 5 stars on offense, but they just were not very good offensively. In fact, the last 6 SEC opponents they faced, they averaged 19 points per game, which just is not going to get it done. So, of course, Kirby Smart had to make a change very quickly. And I think that's something we saw with Derek Mason as well, that, okay, it's changed, it's evolved. I've got to make a change. And I think that's just good wisdom by the head coach there, especially these defensive minded head coaches.
I agree. And Vandy opened up against Georgia, and I was shocked. Vanderbilt actually was forced Georgia to like 5 or 6 field goals, and they did a pretty good job. And I knew immediately this Georgia team isn't as good offensively as they've been the last few years.
Yeah.
And it ended up costing them. They were still very good. They had a great defense for
Right.
sure. But if their offense would have been a little better, they might have, who knows, they might have challenged LSU better.
The Commodores did not just make a change on offense, they made a change on defense as well, and went with very well known to the SEC defensive coordinator Ted Roof, who has a national championship ring from his time at Auburn. Very successful defensive coordinator, and very, in my opinion, a great hire, because this is a guy that brings some credibility. He also brings some very similar philosophies defensively that Coach Mason has, and really seemingly could be a great combination between these two. Could really do some things on the defensive side of the football. So, what are your expectations for Roof coming into the season? Can he help this defense and impact them instantly?
I really don't know. I think the defense was actually, even though they gave up a lot of points, they were actually not that bad.
Right.
I think third down conversion is probably the best indicator of a defense. They were kind of almost in the middle of the pack in the SEC in third down conversion, and they also stopped Georgia on a lot of third downs, obviously,
Right.
forcing all those field goals. So it remains to be seen. I mean, Mason had a pretty good system. He was a defensive coordinator for a couple of years, and they did really well, especially in 2015 and 2016. They lost Adam Butler and Zach Cunningham after that 2016 season, I think. And that's when things started to go downhill for the defense. They just don't have the defensive linemen to win the battles in the trenches. And I think that's something they're addressing. They're bringing in some defensive linemen. They might be a little better.
Absolutely. Once again, we're talking to Don Yates from VandyMania.com as well as 14powers.com. Now, one of the other big question marks headed into next season for the Commodores will be the quarterback position. And obviously, this is a position of concern and a position they knew they needed to address because of the 19 players they signed in the 2020 class. 4 of the 19 were quarterbacks. And of course, one of those, our listeners know I'm real big on Ken Seals for the future at Vanderbilt. I think he's an absolute star in the making. But there's obviously going to be some really good competition with a couple of transfer quarterbacks coming in as well. So, what are you looking for in this positional battle headed into the fall?
They're looking at somebody who can be a leader, that can pass, make good decisions, and has some mobility. I think all their quarterbacks are more mobile than they've ever had before. Ken Seals, actually, Vanderbilt has had some spring practice sessions already. They're not going on anymore, obviously, because of the coronavirus, but Ken Seals has been the top dog so far. He's
Absolutely.
showed good leadership, even in like the first or second day of practice. He's telling veterans where they need to be on certain schemes and stuff, and it really looks promising for Ken
Absolutely.
Seals.
Yeah, he's a
But they
guy.
got a
He's a guy we
Go
had on
ahead.
the show. He's a guy we had on the show last year, and I was just really impressed with his film. Of course, he was going against good competition there in Texas, but he just seemed to have that leadership factor about him that sometimes just pops off on screen. And I know they got some guys that are transfers, but still, if you can get a guy like Ken Seals, maybe he can come in and even possibly win this battle.
I think it's very possible. You're going to have a Kentucky transfer coming in named Danny Clark. He's about 6'4", 245 pounds. And you're going to have Mike Wright, who's a true freshman from Georgia, coming in, very mobile, good passer also. So those two guys are going to have something to say about Seals just marching in and taking over the starting quarterback position. But
Absolutely.
it's looking good right now for them.
Well, regardless of who the quarterback is, if this Vanderbilt team is going to improve next season, they're going to have better protection from the offensive line. Of course, another position that's getting a new coach. And I think they did a great job going to get Pete Rosamondo, a really up and coming coach. I've talked to some people about him, and they think he's just a very energetic, enthusiastic, and just a fantastic up and coming young coach. And so, seemingly seems like a great hire for Vanderbilt there. But he's going to have his hands full because the offensive line didn't play very well last season. And probably the guy that played the best, Devin Cochran, is transferring to Georgia Tech. So let me ask you this: who are some of the players who need to step up for this line to improve next season?
Every one of them. Yeah, they all do. It was the offensive line last year was terrible.
Yeah.
It was, and I guess Cochran was the best one of them all. And the guy backing up him was Jonathan Stewart, the 6'7", 326 pound redshirt sophomore. So he's probably the guy that has the most pressure on him. He's taken over the best player, but Vandy lost a couple of after 2016. They lost a couple of really good offensive linemen, and Bruno Reagan and Justin School. I think School's in the NFL right now. Reagan, I think, is in this new pro league playing. But they're really missing them guys. They haven't really replaced them.
Absolutely. Now, we've only talked about a few of the challenges that this Vanderbilt team is going to be facing next season. And of course, they've got new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, new offensive line coach, probably some new philosophical changes. Got to replace a lot of firepower headed to the NFL. And so, my question for you is this: knowing all of this, knowing the changes, knowing the personnel that has to be changed, knowing all the situations that go in with that, what would you consider a successful season for Vanderbilt in the 2020 season?
I think normal about par for being successful for Vanderbilt is getting to a bowl game and having a winning season. I know most other SEC teams would cringe at that, but for Vandy fans, figure before 2008 they'd only been to 3 bowl games in
Right.
their history. So it's still a big deal for Vandy to make it to like even the Birmingham Bowl or the Independence Bowl. I mean, they're happy to get that, and I think that would be a good goal for them. Get to a bowl game. Of course, anything better than that, still welcome. It's welcome. 8 wins, 9 wins, and as many as they can get.
Absolutely.
But I don't know if they can reach 6 wins. Maybe they can. Maybe these new coordinators are going to come in there and fix some problems. Again, the line play is the big thing. The offensive line. You can put in all the schemes you want, but you got to have the line to be able to compete.
So I guess my follow-up question for you is this, because I know you've got a lot of people inside the program there, and I prerequisite with this, I'm a big fan of Derek Mason. I think that he has done as well as you could expect him to do with some of the circumstances that he's been handed. I think that if given a little bit more time, he'll get the program back in direction that he would like to see the program and the fans would like to see the program going in. But with that said, is a bowl game, if they get to a bowl game, is that enough for Derek Mason to keep his job next season?
I think so. I mean, they've kept him this long,
Yeah.
and last year was pretty rotten. They lost to UNLV 34-10 on their home field, and they still kept him. That was actually the first time I could think of a game, probably missing one, where they lost to someone that Mason lost to someone that he wasn't supposed to lose to. He's
Right.
always been able to usually come up with wins when the team's supposed to win, and maybe one upset. The big upset of his tenure was the win at Georgia in 2016. He had a near miss at Auburn the following year. It was a very controversial call and a fumble. That was the game
Yeah.
where Zach Cunningham jumped over the line and blocked the the field goal attempt by
Right.
Georgia, and they enacted a new rule. Oh, excuse me, by Auburn, and enacted a new rule to disallow that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Absolutely. Once again, we're talking to Don Yates, vandymania.com and 14powers.com. Don, could you just let our listeners know where they can find you at on social media and where they can follow you at online as well?
you can find us at Twitter at vandymania.com, and on Facebook, just search Vandymania, and we have several pages. We have a baseball page, we have a main page, we have a basketball page. So you can find us searching Vandymania, Mania.
Absolutely. Once again, Don, appreciate so much you taking some time and being with us, and look forward to having you again on the show real soon.
Hey, thanks a lot, Peter. Thanks for having me.